Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Gary, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Mary.
I'm really interested to talk with you, and you have quite a vantage point when we talk about unhealthy work environments and where people really are caught in bad places and trying to help them get resolution and move forward, since you deal a lot with employment law and people in these situations. So I'm excited to talk about what you see and advice that you have. But before we get there, I want to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Oh wow, that's an interesting one. So I think the first job I ever had, I played baseball growing up, and I used to work for my hitting coach. He did hitting and pitching lessons. So when he did pitching lessons, he needed someone to catch for the pitchers. So I would take my hitting lesson with him, and then I would go work the rest of his pitching lessons as his like catcher. So that was my first job ever. That was in high school, and then honestly, I didn't have guess another real job until I started practicing law because I went on to play baseball in college. Tough to have a job then. That's kind of a year-round thing. Then I go to law school. I did a clerk job in law school, and then my job as an attorney, where I've been an employment attorney for almost 13 years now. It'll be 13 years in September. And yeah, it's been great. So yeah, I don't have too much to compare compare it to in the professional world, but it's been great so far.
Well, playing sports and playing sports at that level is certainly like a job, right? I mean,
Right,
you,
right.
you couldn't really practically go to school, high school or college, and play sports at that level. So, so I'm sure you had different kinds of coaches and teammates, which are substitutes for bosses and colleagues. Um, can you tell us about what it was like playing college level sports and what you learned, what worked well for you, and things that were difficult?
Yeah, no, I think you see a lot of similarities between being on a team and working for a company. I think a lot of individuals' strengths and weaknesses show up very similarly. So yeah, it's as far as the learning experiences playing sports, it's how to be a good teammate, right? How to be a team player. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not all about you to look at the bigger picture. You're a part of something bigger. That was something that sports really ingrains in you. The work ethic. You got to work for everything you get, and I think that's really helpful in the working world. And yeah, I mean, from playing sports, I think it's really prepared you for that the working world because a day in the life, especially when you're playing in college, because you have class still and all that stuff. A day in the life there is like nothing compared to a 9 to 5 or even like a nine to six or 9 to 7 job. It seems kind of like clockwork and pretty easy. You're not used to having a ton of free time, so made the transition in the working world pretty easy and prepares you for it. And yeah, there's also things the same stuff that some people need to work on. As an athlete, I think you need to work on as a professional in the working world. So, like I said, those same positive and negative traits seem to show up in both worlds, and there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah. So, what did you do your undergraduate in?
Political science. So yeah, I went to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. Science. Yep. And yeah, I had no idea that I wanted to go to law school. I had no idea at all. I was kind of thinking about getting through college, what's a major that I'm somewhat interested in, and yeah, really didn't have a next step. And then yeah, baseball came to an end, and decided to look around in law schools. Got into Florida State University. That's where I went to law school. That's where Florida State memorabilia up there. Yep, went to Florida State, graduated 2012, and then immediately started practicing employment law in Tampa, Florida. I'm licensed in Florida and 8 other states, so 9 states total. So practice in a good amount of states around the country.
Well, law school obviously is no joke. It's, to kind of fall into it, you obviously it's difficult. It's very demanding. So you go to law school, and did you know what kind of law you wanted to practice, or why law? I mean, there's so many things you could have done.
Right, right. So it was a really interesting time in the world when I graduated undergrad in 2008. So the financial
Mm.
crisis hit. There wasn't many jobs out there. I honestly, I wanted to stay in sports, and I was like, at this time, it's tough to get any kind of jobs. I said, let me do some kind of graduate degree, and I thought law would give me the opportunity to open up a lot of doors, whether it be in the sports world or elsewhere. I was looking at either wanting to be like a member of a front office of a sports franchise or a sports agent. Those people usually have a legal background. So that was my initial thought. And, as time goes on, the plans kind of change here and there. And then I got interested in plaintiff's law. So representing people, the people bringing the claim, which is typically the little guy. Against the big guy. So toward the end of law school, I knew I wanted to get on the plaintiff side. Um, and didn't have any idea it would be in employment law. I was just kind of applying around. The job market was really tough for lawyers when I got out of law school too, because a lot of people had the same idea that I had in 2008, 2009. They kind of hit out in grad school, law school, and everybody was coming out at the same time. So, I kind of just took the first plaintiff side job that I got, and I ended up loving employment law, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
So,
Yeah.
so what is it that you enjoy about doing employment law?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something everybody can relate to. Everybody, regardless of who you are, what your profession is, everybody has some kind of workplace issue at some point in time throughout their career, right? So it's something that I think everybody can relate to and appreciate. It's someone's livelihood, right? Someone loses their job, or someone's currently working and their lives being made miserable, it's something that truly impacts their life. It impacts their family. It impacts their finances. So to be able to help people get put in a better position moving forward when that something in the workplace has put them in a bad position, whether it be a termination or just a hostile environment that they're working in. That feels good. It feels like you're doing something good. Look, there are a lot of people that have workplace issues that may not necessarily be illegal. So you have to really, really like search these potential claims with a fine tooth comb. Not every case can be accepted, which pains me to say. It's tough to have an actual legal claim versus something that may be wrong or unfair. But no, I just really love helping people that were wronged. Something about me always likes fighting for the underdog, the little guy. It's not easy going up against big businesses, so you need to have someone with experience that knows how to navigate these claims. And I'm confident that that's what I can bring to the table for an individual and help get them in a good position moving forward.
I'm glad that you brought that up because, as you know, people are really harmed in their environments. They can be really harmed. And when an injustice is committed against us and we have been mistreated, we think, well, the law will be on our side because the law is for justice. This is unjust and it has negatively impacted my finances, my health, my family, all these really negative repercussions. And so I'm going to sue, not only because it's what I deserve, but in order to stop these bad practices. And so they want to be a good citizen, a good colleague to shine light on what's going on. And unfortunately, I don't know if, I mean, it is the case that a lot of what has happened in the workplace, it might be morally wrong, but not legally is not illegal. So can you talk a little bit more
Right.
about what you see where people's expectations are and what's actually the case?
Right, absolutely. You hit that right on the head. Something can be cruel, harsh, unfair, not moral, but it doesn't always amount to being illegal. Sometimes it does. So basically, I can try to sum it up in, probably a quick 30-second to 1 minute pitch here. But basically, for something to be illegal in the workplace, it has to be either discriminatory based on what's called a protected class: race, gender, age, religion, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, a couple other categories, or retaliatory, where someone had complained about discrimination, and is then terminated or suffers some kind of adverse action. Now, here's where a lot of people confuse retaliation. So, not just any complaint is protected. So, if you go to HR or upper management and say, my supervisor is being mean to me, the company can say, okay, you don't like it, terminated. On its face, that right there would not be illegal. Now, if you say, my supervisor is treating me differently because of my race or my gender or my age, whatever it may be. And then they retaliate against you without a legitimate reason to terminate you or whatever the adverse action may be, then that's illegal. So you have to engage in what's called protected activity. So that's one bucket of claims. And then the other, there's two other buckets that I mainly see: sexual harassment in the workplace. That's obviously illegal. If you complain about sexual harassment, you're protected from retaliation. And then the third, and this is probably the most popular bucket, is relating to medical issues in the workplace. So there are various protections related to missing time or needing an accommodation due to medical issues under the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, or the FMLA. And a lot of times we see individuals that are asking for time off due to medical reasons, and an employer will terminate them, even though their situation qualifies for protection. Um, Maternity and paternity leave situations are protected as well. We get a lot of pregnancy discrimination cases. So you're not fired because you're pregnant or because you're seeking a maternity or paternity leave. Most companies are going to come up with what they say. This is our legitimate business reason. That's usually where the battle spot, um, where we say, no, this is what's called a pretext, like a make believe reason. And that's usually where the battle of the cases is fought, right? So, that's the best synopsis I can give. There are a couple other exceptions and claims that you typically see, but that for the most part, those are the what I call the three main buckets of claims and what's unlawful versus what's just unfair.
Yeah. I want to talk about two of those. So one that goes into the category, I want to talk about age, and then I also want to talk about bullying. So insofar as bullying isn't bullying because you're in a particular protected class, um, when does bullying reach the level of something that you could bring a suit against, and when is it just mean and awful and ought not be allowed because it's the wrong thing to do?
Right, right. That's a great question. A lot of people come to me saying I'm being bullied, and that right there on its face is cruel and harsh or unfair as it may be. It isn't illegal. Now, if you're being bullied because of race, age, gender, religion, etc., or let's say the bullying rises to something where you're developing medical issues, right? Anxiety, um, PTSD, whatever it may be, high blood pressure, then that could trigger some things where, oh hey, I'm being bullied, I need time off, I need to be away from this person because of my medical, because it's triggering a medical condition or medical symptoms. Then that could trigger the ADA and accommodations and things like that. So that's what I would do if you are experiencing bullying. One, state specifically to the employer that it is due to a protected class if you believe that to be true, um, or state that you're developing some medical symptoms and that you'd like to be removed from the bully or bullies or the manager to accommodate you so you don't have these medical symptoms. If that truly is the case, of course, you always want to be truthful and honest, but that's where you can find a claim, as opposed to just general, hey, I'm being bullied, I'm being treated in a hostile manner. That on its face wouldn't be illegal without a little bit more there.
Which I think is actually good news because anybody can be accused of anything, right? So somebody might think my tone is bullying, and it might feel like that to them, but in the grand scheme of things, it actually isn't. This person just doesn't resonate with me and my management style, or vice versa. And so we don't want just any claim, right, to be able to, be litigated against. Of course, we want to try to help people work out their own problems before they get so bad that they come to someone like you, where they really are in pain and they have been hurt and they're suffering all these ramifications. Because, of course, once they go through any sort of legal process for that client, it's not over. They're still going to deal with those ramifications of the psychological or the health implications of being mistreated.
Right, that's right. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I'm writing a book right now on generation gaps and how do we have healthy work environments given the fact that there are all these different generations at work and that poses certain kinds of challenges. So, what kind of generation discrimination are you seeing? Is it mostly just on the ends, older generation, younger generation, or what do you see?
Right, that's a good question. So to bring an age discrimination claim, you actually have to be over the age of 40. So
Oh,
you
okay.
technically can be treated worse because you're younger, unfortunately. Um, the age of 40, like 40 used to be, I guess, a little bit toward the older side of the workforce, but now it's not. People are still earlier in their career in 40, but still, you can be 40 on the dot, anywhere from 40 to 140, and still bring a claim. But that's the threshold to bring an age discrimination claim. We see a lot of situations where people are being asked to when they're going to retire, and this day and age, people are working longer and longer. So a lot of times the question is, I don't know, or no plans imminent, and they're kind of being nudged or pushed out a little bit. A lot of situations where you see duty slowly taken from an older tenured employee, comments made, hey, you're not up to speed on things, you're too slow, even though, look, even people in their 70s and 80s have been using a computer more than half their life nowadays. So I think you see a lot of that where people, companies are assuming that older people aren't up with technology, and they really are, right? So that type of stuff we see. You see them isolated in the workplace at times, and yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have someone that's worked at a place a really long time and really successful, and then they're abruptly terminated, when they're in their 60s or 70s or whatever it may be, that raises eyebrows, and I think that there has to be more to it than just the fact that they're of that age, but you can usually find something to work with as far as age discrimination. And yeah, they're not easy cases, but we get a lot of them. And you hate to see it. I mean, a lot of times companies will try to offer severance to older, longer tenured employees on the way out. So sometimes they get that and they don't have the need to take legal action, or maybe sometimes they get that and that package isn't fair or reasonable, and they decide to come take action. Maybe they didn't get any offer at all, and then they come without anything on the table. We have to negotiate from scratch. So we see a lot of that. But yes, it's has to be 40 or over to bring a claim under what's called the ADEA. That's the Age Discrimination Act.
Hmm. So when you think about careers, right? So it used to be the case that people were, they were in one company until they retired, right? And that's obviously not the case anymore. And so when we think about loyalty to a company, when we think about loyalty to ourselves, being a professional, and seeing all that you see with people who have poured their lives into companies and then just being cut out, how do you see that balance? And what kind of advice would you give to, friends about that balance of being a professional, being loyal to a company, but not so loyal, more loyal than they're going to be to you?
Right. Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's been like a slippery slope, and I think both sides of the coin are probably responsible. I think, companies companies a lot of times are just they're turning into bigger and bigger corporations. Back in the day, I feel like you didn't see as many mergers and acquisitions and conglomerates and all that. And when that happens, I think the loyalty from the company side dwindles, and they start letting people go, cutting back. And I think when the workforce sees that, hey, this is probably going to happen to me eventually anyway, right? They're constantly just looking for what's next and what's better. And then I think that's created kind of a slippery slope. Well, oh, hey, people are just jumping around jobs. Companies are like, why are we rewarding them? And then it's just this cycle that we're in. So when I first started this almost 13 years ago, I saw a ton of people that were super tenured. Like I'd see 10, 15, 20-year employees all the time. Now, if I see someone that's been in a place 4 or 5 years, I'm like, okay, they're long tenured, right? So it's that I've seen that change over the last decade or so. And it's industry by industry, I think. Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely the loyalty is not really there on either side, and I think both sides can point fingers, at who's to blame. I think both have fair points, but yeah, hopefully we can see that restored, as time goes on. Hopefully, but I don't know. I don't know how that's going to shake out. Yeah, I mean, maybe with as technology is developing. I know a lot of jobs are being replaced by technology with AI coming to the forefront right now. So we'll see how that shakes out and how that impacts things. But yeah, definitely a great question. And I've definitely seen a change in loyalty on both sides throughout my career doing this.
No, I think that's a really interesting point about the bigger you get, the less personal you're going to get. Of course, I mean this makes a lot of sense, and so there is some good reasons to have very large organizations when you're trying to do something really big, right? When you're creating something, or you just given what it is that you are, you need a really big organization. But the problem with the big organization is that it's so easy for people to become cogs in a machine. You can have that happen in a family business where you got 10, 20 people because the business can take over the busyness. And so we just treat people as these little
Right,
pegs, right? So it can happen anywhere. But when you have a lack of loyalty on both sides, then you are going to get quiet quitting, you're going to get quiet firing, you're going to get disengagement, which is bad for everybody, right?
right,
And so if we want what's good for the individual, for the business, for communities, many times smaller is better in the sense
right,
of this is how we work when we are seen. And you
right,
don't get seen by a spreadsheet, you get seen by individuals seeing other individuals. Because while AI is wonderful and it is replacing things, and who knows what the future is, we're still going to be human persons, and human persons operate in a certain kind of way. So I don't know. I don't think we can solve the problem here of making things
right,
smaller.
right.
Um, but if that is the case, that smaller is better in certain circumstances, do you have any advice about as somebody goes they just get hired, they're in a new place, what are some things they can do to be the best colleague they can be, the best employee they can be, but also safeguard themselves? I mean, conflict is not the problem. We're going to have conflict. Conflict happens everywhere. But from it escalating to them actually needing to see you because they've been severely harmed.
Right, right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to try to resolve things before, the need for counsel gets involved. I mean, I think just being upfront and clear about any concerns you have, documenting those concerns, I think is huge. Really putting the employer on notice, and once they do that, a lot of the laws that we just talked about, once a complaint is made or genuine concern is documented, then an employer has a duty to investigate and look into it and all that. So yeah, you always want to look out for yourself. I mean, I would first obviously try to resolve it without counsel if you can, and if it escalates, then then you're documented and you have that paper trail moving forward should you need to. But yeah, be clear, be upfront. Don't waver if you have concerns. Be upfront about it. Um, now HR is typically the route to go if a company has that. But you got to realize HR is on the side of the company too, right? They're very nice people. They do a great job, but at the same time, they're working for the company. They're there to protect the company, not protect the employees. And I think that's a big misconception that people have. HR is not on your side, right? They are there for the company to cover the company's behind. Um, yes, they will listen to you, they will talk to you, but make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're not your advocate. They're there for the company. Yeah.
I like that you said HR people are nice people and they want to help. This has been my experience. I mean, everybody I've met in HR, they get into this business because they want to help people. They want to help
Right,
people have better environments. And the way HR has transitioned in the past 50 years, I think, in our litigious society, and the fact of the matter is that they do work for this organization and they want to stay employed. And so I don't know why so many people think that I'm going to go to HR and they are my advocate. Because yes, they are not your advocate. They may be wonderful. They are mostly, by and large,
right,
wonderful people,
right,
but their job is to make sure that policies are followed so that the organization you know, stays afloat, right?
right,
And the
right,
policies are covered. And so that's really, really important that they aren't your representation. In fact, they
right.
are representing the company.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they're kind of hand in hand with the company's legal department with that, whether it be an in-house or outside legal team, they are. in connection with them that helps defend the company. Right. So yeah, if you bring concerns, yeah, they're going to look into them because they legally have to, right? And they're going to talk to you, of course. And again, very nice people. They're doing their jobs, right? They're just doing their job, but their job is not to protect you; it's to protect the company. Right.
And we might say that if I don't have a complaint right now, I'm glad that HR is doing these things to keep the company afloat, that they
Right.
are, making sure, about compliance or whatever it
Right.
might be, that if we
Right.
want your organization to stay in business, we want a robust, healthy HR that's not
Right.
just advocating for this, that, or the other, maybe spurious complaint that's put
Right.
forward. So, so it's not a bad thing. It can just feel sometimes when when you have one expectation. I'm having this really difficult situation. Who do I go to? People say, "Oh, go see HR." Well, I'm a huge proponent of the ombuds organization, because the
Right.
ombuds is, or some sort of conflict management, is a wonderful first place to go, so that you can have someone who's neutral, someone you're not reporting, they aren't for anybody, but really fair practice, so that you can kind of start to see, okay, what is the lay of the land? What is my next step?
Right.
What are the things that I ought to do given the nature of the complaint? And many times it's just, how can I de-escalate so I can have that difficult conversation and
Right.
deal with it and then move forward?
Right. Right. I would still like document everything, even if a company has like an anonymous hotline or something like that. I still would try to document things, whether you think it's going to lead to things changing or not. You want to protect yourself. A lot of times HR will want to talk on the phone and not have these conversations in writing, which is fine. But I would follow up and document things and make sure you're protected. And then that's clear that no one can ever say, "Oh, well, you didn't say this or you didn't say that." That puts them on notice in writing, keep track of the emails. That's the best way to protect yourself. But again, look, you want to try to resolve something amicably before it escalates to that. But if it does ever get to the point where you think the legal situation is going to happen at some point, you definitely want to document it and put your concerns in writing.
Documentation can sound like I'm building my case. And of course, that's one thing that you want,
Right,
right? But it doesn't,
right.
again, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It could just be, so many conflicts and issues that happen at work is because we're not clear with one another. And
That's
so if
it.
you set the expectation with your colleagues and your bosses that this is how I operate, I want to make sure we're always on the same page,
Right,
because we waste time and resources. We get our feelings hurt when I'm doing one thing because I thought you said this to me, but you thought it meant something else. And so the
right,
more we have that as it doesn't ever have to hopefully ever turn to a legal situation, but you don't have this, I'm relying on your faulty memory, or
right,
maybe you're even nefarious, whatever it is that you've got up your sleeve. But if we just follow this normal sort of practice, and it doesn't have to be long, it can just be recaps.
right,
It can be, with all these AI tools, and every conversation
right,
can just be um, so that
right,
we are all on the same page. And getting on the same page is a continual effort. Continue,
right.
because we constantly, you and I could have a conversation. I come away thinking one thing and you have a different take. And if we don't set that right, then it can just grow and grow. And then it can
Right,
really turn into animosity. And um,
right,
my approach is that the vast majority of people at work are all just showing up, trying to do good work. There are some bad actors. And the
right.
wonderful thing about really being clear in your communication is that it outs those people sooner rather than later. So
100%.
when we don't see them and they're working behind the scenes, one bad employee can cause so much havoc to so many people, because most of us are just showing up thinking we're all professionals here. And it just takes a
Right.
while to realize, okay, yeah, but not that person.
Right. I think, yeah, documenting, you can do it in a way that isn't like aggressive. But I think, yeah, if an employee is discriminating or sexually harassing or whatever it may be, or even if it's not something that's illegal, just something you want to put on notice, let's just say legal aside, you put that in writing to the company, make it clear, then that will cause them to take action against that employee sooner. than they would, or maybe cause them to take action when they wouldn't have, right? So that really puts them on notice where they can't brush it under the rug if someone's bringing down the environment, you know?
Hmm. That's right. And everything's in the process of falling apart. I didn't do my dishes like the other day, and then the next day I walk in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, what has happened in here? Because
Right,
everything is falling apart. And so if we want to have a healthy work environment, that means that we have to continually take action. It's not about being petty. Absolutely not. That's not professional. But when we do really see problems, addressing them instead of, as you said, sweeping them under the rug or practicing wish fulfillment. Oh, somebody will take care of that. Somebody will see this. Of course, they will see it. Well, if it's still happening, either one, they don't see it, or they don't think it's a problem, or they are practicing magical thinking, right? So,
right, right,
articulate it and have that reputation as somebody who is interested in a healthy work environment for all. So if something is off, they'll have a conversation, they'll send that
right,
email, they'll do whatever so that we can have a healthy environment.
right. Exactly.
So when you think about conflict, how do you deal with conflict at work? And has it changed the farther along you've gotten in your career?
Yeah, I try to, when I was with the bigger firm, I guess I was an employee. Now I'm a boss, I guess. If you will, so a little bit different dynamic, but I've always tried to just keep my head down and just do my job. Always be kind to people. Always treat people with respect. Even when I was with the bigger firm, I had a team. Always try to treat it just like a team in sports. Going back to what we said at the beginning, everybody plays their role, everybody plays their part. Yeah, it's going to be zero conflict whatsoever. No, there's always situations that come up, but yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to same thing I said about if you have concerns, raise them. Yeah, address things in a polite and kind manner, direct manner. Always be direct. Always create expectations. And I think people appreciate it when you're direct with them, respectfully, and you treat them with respect, you treat them like a person. Um, you know, I think transitioning to an owner of a firm, I think just uh, I think people do their thing, right? You hired them for a reason. You trust in your people. And if it's not someone you can trust, then you shouldn't have brought them on, right? So really be um, they always say hire slow, right? Yeah, you always want to be very cautious with who you bring on, but once you bring them on, you brought them on for a reason. Trust them, let them do their thing, and don't nag them. No one wants that boss following up with them every morning on something. Yeah, obviously, if there's like a time sensitive thing or whatnot here and there, but for the most part, right, let them do their thing. And they'll deliver typically, right? No one wants to work with someone nagging them or putting a ton of pressure on them. But obviously set those clear expectations, be super direct, and just let people go to work and do what they do, right? Right.
That is a picture perfect of what we want. So when you talked about being in the bigger firm and having colleagues and being clear and direct and setting expectations and treating people well and doing your work, that sounds wonderful. Many people have a hard time doing that. And it's because conflict isn't in the abstract. It's always personal. It's always
Right.
about me and that person at this time in this situation. And so what I might feel very comfortable saying to somebody who I'm very friendly with, the exact same thing I might have a hard time saying to somebody who I've had problems with in the past, or I've seen how they've treated others, and maybe it doesn't really resonate with
Right.
me. So, how do have you had any experiences like that, and how have you found the courage to speak up anyway, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I can't think of any personal experiences, honestly. To draw on. Um, but I'd say, in general, look at everybody thinks differently. People have different brains, different ways of doing things. Try to put yourself in the other shoes, right? And I think um, try to relate the best you can, whether you're the supervisor or whether you're the employee, right? Try to think of it, as you're in the other person or other people's shoes, right? So yeah, that's probably the best way that I would approach it if something came up. But yeah, I can't think of any personal situations. Sorry,
That's
but
that's
uh,
fantastic, right?
yeah, yeah, and
And
I was pretty chill. I mean, Um, my firm before was pretty small too. It was about 10, 12 attorneys. So I haven't worked with a larger organization ever. Probably don't ever intend to. I enjoy doing. Yeah, I'd love to grow my firm. It's been about 7 months since we started, and we've got a handful of employees right now, hoping to grow. And yeah, I'll just try to keep those principles that I just talked about as we hopefully grow here. But yeah, I don't have any like bad experiences personally. Honestly, everything's been pretty smooth. With my prior firm and now, been pretty good environments.
That's wonderful. It's interesting given your line of work because every once in a while I'll talk to somebody and I say what I do because I go into organizations, help them with their conflict. I'm a workplace
Right,
mediator. And and someone says, there's an actual job. I mean, there's that much conflict at work. And I think you are, God bless you. You are so lucky in
right,
that you've only had good experiences. And of course, you could have two people working at the same place and one's having a good experience and one isn't for just a whole
right,
host of reasons.
right,
Um, but um, but what you do for a living is you just see explosions left and right in people's, in what has happened to them at work, the pain that they are going through. And so when you think about the clients that you have had and the situations that you have seen, can you give some advice about, like when is when you've seen you wish, oh, if this person had come to me a few months earlier, or these are the red flags that if this person had seen, so much of this could have been averted. Is there anything like that? Because not all of us have the wherewithal, and because we don't know the future, to say, yeah, they're gonna do this shenanigans, so I should get a lawyer
right.
right away.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, I think if you're placed on kind of an unwarranted performance improvement plan or coaching plan and action plans, every company calls it something different. But if you get some unwarranted discipline, that's when you see that the company is kind of starting to work toward termination. And yeah, sometimes it makes sense to get a lawyer involved right away. Sometimes it makes sense to maybe escalate your concerns internally first. It really depends on the situation. Um, but yes, I would definitely seek counsel and document your concerns once you start seeing yourself get written up. Once the employer starts documenting itself, you want to
Mm,
document yourself, right?
mm.
So yes, and yeah, I mean, I would if you get an unwarranted write-up, warning, discipline, performance improvement plan, you want to give a rebuttal to that in writing, right back at them, if you don't agree and if you think it's discriminatory or retaliatory or whatever it may be. So those type of things you can do to protect yourself once they start going down that line. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times you wish someone would come to you before a termination. Sometimes it may be premature. Sometimes I may say, hey, do this and call me back if you're let go. Right. Sometimes we can get involved prior to termination. It really just depends on the situation. There's no hard and fast rule, but yeah, a good majority of our clients are still, I wouldn't say majority, a good amount of our clients are still employed. Majority are ones that have been terminated, but we do take a good amount of cases with people that are currently employed, and we try to resolve their conflict for them. A lot of times, what that looks like is in the form of a severance package. Usually, once it gets to that point where they're needing to retain counsel and a company's looking to get rid of them, sometimes we can part ways amicably before we get to that difficult situation for everyone. And I think companies appreciate it when we get involved before termination too, because it avoids the blow up type situation.
That's really good advice. What you said resonated with me. Once they start documenting, document back, right?
Right.
It's difficult, I think, from the employer's point of view because sometimes people are misbehaving, right? And maybe you have a robust way to try to coach them around, but they just aren't willing at that time. They don't want to do what it is they need to do, and so they go down this route. And it seems like in the abstract again that this important, like a PIP or whatever it might be, it sounds like a good idea. Okay, how can we deal with the situation and get you back on track? But we know that many people use that as, you're about to be let go. So, um, and if you don't know the difference, you could retain counsel. Ask somebody, like, what does this really mean here? I need help. And this is the thing. I personally think that no organization should ever put somebody on an employee improvement plan or whatever they call it without giving them a person. right? They
Right.
need some kind of person, and it's not an HR person, some kind of neutral person or an advocate person, preferably, that is going to help them through it because it's even if the employer thinks, oh, they know this is coming, I've never met somebody who knew it was coming,
Right.
because most of us are the hero of our story. We don't think we're doing anything wrong. And if we're acting in a certain way, it's usually in our narrative, it's because of something else that's been going on, right?
Right.
And so, in order to treat people well, we should always try to leave people better than we found them. They need somebody to help them through this process. And if you're unwilling to give that to that person, then why are you even putting them on an employee improvement plan?
Right.
Because you're not investing in them.
Right, right. I see a lot of people come to me and they'll say, I got this PIP. I was supposed to have, weekly check-ins and supervisor didn't check in with me and they just threw this at me, gave me these unrealistic goals, didn't help me through it. And then, they got to the end of whatever the 30, 45, 60-day PIP and that was it. Right. So I mean, a lot of times there's subjective goals on the PIP too, that
Yeah.
how do you meet those? What does this mean, right? The salespeople sometimes you'll see will have objective goals, right? Quotas and things like that. But even those sometimes are kind of all over the map because you may not have the same quota or goals as your peers. Companies are using algorithms for these now, so it's not as cut and dry as it maybe used to be in the past. Like, hey, you and I are both salespeople. We have to sell 50 grand a month each, right? Now it's rarely are you seeing the same quota for peers. It all depends on region and how long you've been there and growth goals and all that. So, like, even with the sales stuff, is what I'm trying to say. Even the objective goals could be subjective in a certain way, right? Or arbitrary. Is probably the best way to say it. So, yeah, I guess there are some companies, maybe the minority of the companies that may really have genuine interest in seeing someone improve when they place them on the pit. But I'd say the vast majority of the time is um, to try to get rid of somebody and try to document it, without just abruptly terminating them.
It makes me sad because,
Yeah.
in organizations, I'm very interested in management and so many people become managers and they get no training on for the personal skills, right? No leadership training. It's just the hard stuff, like how to run the company, whatever. But not all of these skills of what do you do when you have employees who have gaps in performance and behavior? It will happen. It happens to everybody. So how do
Right.
we right that ship sooner rather than later, deal with things, conflicts early, often swiftly and justly,
Mhm.
because the conflict isn't the problem, it's when we don't manage it,
Right.
and get them back on track. Um, and articulate that to the employee from day one. And as things go through, so that this constant communication again, right? The more we can communicate, and so that when we part ways, because sometimes we're going to need to part ways. Sometimes things aren't a good fit. Maybe they were for a few years and now the market has changed or that person has changed and it's no
Mhm.
longer. Like, how do we leave people intact for the next thing? It can be hard. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Business is hard,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be devastating if we treat people well. And
Right.
um, yeah, finding that mechanism, which I think that, once you're getting to a PIP, so many other things have gone wrong
Right.
that,
I think everybody sees them as, oh, I'm done now anyway. So it's kind of got that connotation, that you're pretty much out the door. So I mean, I think as if a company genuinely, um, if I was talking to a company and they asked me from my experience as an employee's attorney, I'd say you can document yourself without putting someone on the formal PIP. You can document your concerns with that employee. Have conversations, follow up with emails, whatever it may be. Because the PIP it seems daunting. It's pretty much done right at that point. I don't think you necessarily need a PIP to defend determination as a company. Um, so I mean, yeah, it's definitely people are seeing the writing on the wall. The people have been around the block long enough where they're like, "Oh, I'm getting pipped out," right? They even have words for it nowadays. Yeah.
So when you look into the future, and you think about how do we have healthier work environments where not only are people treated with dignity and respect, but they're encouraged to thrive and flourish, what do you think needs to happen so that that is ushered in?
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides have to get back to valuing the relationship, valuing the human, valuing loyalty. I think, we've kind of got to a point where it's just like And COVID really jumbled that up, I think, too, and accelerated this, where it's like really shook up the workforce. And companies, I think, are seeing people as kind of just numbers and inhumane, and people are seeing companies as, okay, what's next? Let's. They're always looking for something else. They're always looking for something new. Always looking for what's going to pay them more, and just really focus on the relationship, longevity. Yeah, because we're not seeing people stay with companies a long time and work up the ladder. They're working up the ladder this way. Okay, from this company to this company, this company, this company, right? It's not, just a linear ladder. So, and maybe it'll never go back to that. Maybe that's just the way it's going to be. I don't know, but I think while you are with a company, act like you're going to be there a while, right? Same thing. Companies need to act like that person's going to be there a while. Don't just assume that, on both sides of the coin, right? Don't just assume the company is going to treat you poorly, and the company don't just assume these people are going to hop around, right? Really invest in each other, and and look, yeah, people are going to move around, right? That's just the nature of the game. People always have. I think, like I said, it's been a lot more recently, as far as job jumping and terminations and all that. But yeah, really, really at least act. If you're going to work at a place, you might as well act like you're going to be there a while, and vice versa, right? A company's, you might as well act like that person's going to be there a while. And what's the worst case scenario? You move on, right? So I think that's probably the best way to approach it. I don't know if it'll ever get back to where it was before, where people are working 10, 20, 30 years with a job. You're not seeing pensions or anything like that at a lot of places anymore, right? That like it used to be. So um, I think a lot of that stuff is probably changed why people aren't sticking around quite as much. But yeah, there's ways for companies to incentivize people to stay too. Promotions, retention bonuses, right? Um, I don't know if it'll ever get back to that, will it? I don't know. I think things are going to shake up again here with the AI movement. And we'll see where it ends up. But like you said before, there's still going to be humans involved. There's still going to be a human element, and we need to try to keep that the best we can.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about stability in relationships because, I think that we need to be able to articulate what is the good you're going to get from staying and having people stay. Right.
Right,
And so we think about long-term memory. We think about building relationships because the quality of our life at work and other places is directly proportional to the quality of our relationships.
right,
And so networking is really, really good. And it's very human if, not this like greasy networking, but the networking where we
right,
really help each other, right? This reciprocal altruism. I help you, you help me. And we can build those so that we can have better lives. And instability, as we see in our world, um, is not a driver, like rampant instability, continual instability is not a driver to success and happiness for most,
right,
right? And so if we can somehow readjust about, what would be a night? Is it 5, 6, 7 years, 4 years of somebody staying someplace? What is sort of that sweet spot? And then, maybe somebody stays 30 years and maybe somebody stays to 6 months, but setting those expectations and then the policies around that, but valuing it, as you said, from both sides, both the company, there are things they can do, and the employee, there are things that they can do to have that stability to develop those relationships, which is really good for everybody.
right,
And I
right,
think it also goes to really thinking about the people aspect, right? How do we treat our people? Because nobody is a number, nobody's a cog machine, everybody's a person. And if we rethink our policies about people first, we are persons first and employees some way down the line, right?
right,
But and of course, the better we treat our people, the more money you're going to make.
right,
This just is the way it goes. So you mistreat your people, you are burning money.
right. Right. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day for a lot of corporations, right? And that's the name of the game. I get it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You have good people working for you. People matter, right? The people you work for matter. Yeah, look, obviously they can impact a small organization more than a larger one, but at the same time, you need everybody tugging on the same rope. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. People truly matter in a day and age where there's a lot of things automated and analytics stats and all that. It still comes down to the people that are making decisions, and people that are working whether it be virtually or in person or on the front lines, right? It still comes down to the people. And yeah, that's at the end of the day. still going to need employees, right? You're still going to need people to go to battle for you, right? As a company. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And because people matter, we want to empower them so that they can articulate and have difficult conversations, know who to go to for help. And when people are misbehaving and really taking advantage of them, then having the law, having lawyers, employment lawyers who will come in and say, no, just because you're bigger, you're this big, this big organization, you don't get to take advantage of these people. And so there are all these steps that we can take, but it is important that when people are acting selfishly and only out for their own good, um, to know that hopefully, increasingly, you can't get away with it.
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
well, Gary, thank you so much for your time. It's been a delightful conversation.
Thanks so much, Mary. I really appreciate you having me. It's been awesome.
And I appreciate your work because I love what I do, trying to get people so that they can solve their problems so it doesn't escalate to get to you. But I'm so glad that there are people like you who will say, when it has gotten this bad, we're going to, it's unjust and there are things that you can do.
Right. Right. Exactly. With a hammer behind what you do, I guess.
All right, well, take care.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Gary, thank you so much. I really appreciate the work that you are doing. When I go into organizations, I talk about why you want to invest in ombuds programs, conflict management programs, so that people can solve their issues earlier rather than later, so they don't escalate. But we know they do escalate, and we know sometimes there are bad actors in the world, and so if you don't solve your problems and if you aren't paying attention, you don't have a healthy work environment, then we need people to be protected by employment lawyers, but like people like Gary. So, Gary, thank you so much for the work that you are doing to help people when they find themselves in really difficult situations. Conflict Managed is produced by Third Party Workplace Conflict Restoration Services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you would please like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this, I really appreciate it. You can find our conversation also on YouTube if you want to watch it at 3P Conflict Restoration. If you haven't had a chance to check out my book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure, it's 80 tips of what not to do and starts a conversation about what to do instead. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.